So anyway, I want to welcome you here. I'm Brian Kane, president of RPCN, and I'm standing in for Mike Malaire, who's our videographer this morning. So one of the things that Mike and I have wanted to do, and we did this with Sandy Parker, and we're doing this again with Mike Alt, is really to try to introduce you to people who really have their finger on the pulse, essentially, of what's going on in the region economically. Because RPCN is really trying to move in the direction of helping you understand what opportunities are out there. You know, what's going on economically, what are the trends, you know, and where can you know, what's out there so we can think about how to position ourselves as consultants, you know, to support the development and growth of the region. And by the way, in May there's going to be a meeting, and I'll get that information a little later for you, the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council, and want to make sure that you know, you're welcome to go and check that out as well.
May 3rd.
What's that?
May 3rd.
May 3rd, okay. So, so Mike Alt is the director of Eastman Business Park, and if you remember, if you hear when Sandy Parker was here, she said that the park has 7,000 people working in it. It's a really critical piece of our economic infrastructure, right? So Mike joined Eastman Kodak in 1980 after graduating from Clarkson University with a degree in chemical engineering. He later received an MS in electrical engineering from RIT. And this is a favorite quote, I understand, from Mike, so don't quote me on it, but well, it actually is. Central Park is 843 acres. Eastman Business Park is 1,243 acres. Right? So it's 50% larger than Central Park. It's a huge piece of real estate in this region, and it's a very important piece of real estate. So thanks very much for coming this morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's yours. So, good morning.
So let me give you another analogy for the size of your business to start to pick it up. So you could take the whole entire city of Rochester within the universe, put that at Eastman Business Park. You could take the whole University of Rochester campus, put that at Eastman Business Park. Danny Wayton's newest superstore, and still have room for one of the governor's proposed casinos. That's how big that park is. How's that? That a little better tied back home in case you haven't walked all 840 acres in Central Park. I'm going to take you through just a little bit of nostalgia. I think this group probably knows it as I look around and see the little bit, right? I like gray. Not bad. So, and what I really want to do is keep this open. So if you have any questions along the way, certainly feel free to jump in. And I'm also happy to take some questions about Eastman Kodak Company. So just to be very clear, Eastman Business Park, for some of you probably remember the name Kodak Park. So it's Kodak's largest manufacturing facility. It is not a separate entity. It is still owned and operated by Kodak, and Kodak is in fact the largest user of the park. So everybody knows, right, that Rochester was the original boom town and the largest manufacturer of flowers. The river, Genesee River, and everybody knows the Genesee River. How many rivers in North America flow north?
One.
Two?
St. John's River, Jacksonville, Florida.
Susquehanna River. You must be the snowbird, I was going to say.
Just a little bit long.
So yeah, we certainly built on that. But I think what's important as we talk about repurposing and revitalizing the economic development activities of Rochester, really there's a significant history in Rochester for innovation. And one of my other favorite quotes is the one that goes, I think it was Edison who said, innovation isn't inspiration, it's perspiration. Right? It's not easy to make new products and get them out to the marketplace. And we'll talk about why Eastman Business Park, in fact, is a great asset to this region for helping to do that. But there is incredible talent in the Rochester region. We're one of the top cities in the country with patents per capita, one of the highest number of advanced degrees per capita, and we have an incredibly talented workforce. Much of that was due to the great universities and the long history of companies like Kodak and Xerox and others here that trained and developed all these people. When companies come here, they're very impressed, and these are companies from out of states and sometimes outside the U.S. They're very impressed by the workforce capabilities we have here. So that's really important to understand as we go forward and talk about how Eastman Business Park can help create the new economy jobs in this region. I'm not going to go through a lot of some of Kodak's history, but one of the things I also portray about Eastman Business Park, and Mike, am I moving too much for you?
That's okay.
Okay, you're good. Is that there is a long history of invention that came from the park. And there's actually a spot, for those of you who remember the corner of Dewey and Ridgeway, there used to be a couple of tall buildings. That was the original photo finishing site. When we took those buildings down a few years back, we actually had a big implosion there and a demolition. But I stop there when I give a tour and say, you know, if you have pictures of your grandparents in your house, that film was produced here at Eastman Business Park, and it was developed right here in this spot and printed where we're sitting right now. You know, and most people get a pretty warm and fuzzy feeling from that, quite honestly. But then I also tell them about the significance of this in protecting our country, that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kodak was instrumental in providing aerial film to our government. And the next day after they called about that, we sent a processor down to the Pentagon, or to DC, maybe the Pentagon wasn't built back then, I'm not sure the exact time. Sent the processor down there so they could then process their own aerial film and figure out what was going on there. And of course, all the medical x-rays and the motion picture industry was changed by Kodak. You know, when you were able to now produce pictures on screens in town, that just opened up all these communities around the country to be able to see actors versus live shows. So you just think about the history of this site. And I don't want you know, feel bad that we went from 30,000 people down to 7,000. That you ought to be happy that we're growing again, and that's a good thing for the community. So I don't want anybody to feel sympathy for us. Okay. Just a couple other things. The company has made significant investments in revitalizing Eastman Business Park. And particularly between 2003 and 2007, Eastman Kodak Company spent over $200 million to take down 40 buildings and pare us from 22 million square feet of space to 16 million square feet of space. Now, how big is 16 million square feet of space? People always ask me, is this the biggest industrial park in the U.S.? And so I'd like to say yes, but the answer is no. There are others around the country that are 10,000 acres, 5,000 acres. But what I do believe, you know, and I've looked at those, very few of those, if any of those, okay, and I haven't been to all of them, can say that they have 1,250 acres, 16 million square feet of space, and the diversity of manufacturing and development assets that we have. Many of those have a lot of land. You know, one of the biggest ones at 10,000 square feet only has something like 1 million square feet of space. It's in Oklahoma, so they just have this big place that they set up as a park, and they're trying to build and attract companies there. We already have the existing assets. That's going to play very well for us as we go to attract companies. Okay, Eastman Business Park. So how many people in here, and keep your hand up, work for Kodak at some point in their life? How many people had a family member? Keep your hand up. How many people have a family member who worked for Kodak? How many people know somebody who worked for Kodak besides me? All right, so everybody raise their hand. Do I get to the point where everybody raised their hand? You know, at the peak we had 60, 65,000 people in Rochester. And I used to chuckle when I first started here. You know, and I'd go back home. I was born in New York City and grew up in Westchester. I says, oh, I know somebody who works at Kodak in Rochester. Do you know so-and-so? No, I'm sorry, I don't. Well, you must. They work somewhere in Rochester. How big's Rochester? Well, you know, if you were born in New York City, people think Rochester was the Midwest. They thought it was just a small little town, you know, with a saloon at the corner. I'm going to skip some of the significance and move to what Kodak will become when we emerge from Chapter 11, because I think that's important. And maybe it's the big question. So today, Kodak is a photography business that also has a printing side of it. When Kodak emerges, we will still have some photography component, but the new name for Kodak will be commercial imaging in the new thrust. And we will be a printing and publishing company, but not so much on the publishing side, making the equipment and the technology for printing. So this is just a picture of the park. For many of you who drive down Ridge Road, I'm going to give you the secret of the day. If you start from Lake Avenue and you go to 390, or from 390 you got to get to Lake Avenue, avoid 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Why is that? CSX is moving 50 coal cars across the tracks, and you'll be backed up for a mile or two. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 2 to 3. I already helped Lori. Take Ridgeway. The park is 3.5 miles from one end to the other. It goes all the way from Lake Avenue. It actually goes all the way down to the river, if you want to count our wastewater treatment plant, and goes literally all the way over to 390. 390 runs just along the very western end. And it goes a mile from Ridge Road all the way down to Lexington. So it is a very large facility. There's over 120 buildings in there, 16 million square feet of space, 40 tenants now. We're growing. We added about 4 or 5 tenants last year. We've already added a couple this year, and I'll talk more about who those are. So this is an incredibly large facility. You may have seen the end of last year, right before Christmas, we announced the sale of our utilities business to a company called Recycled Energy Development. Why would we do that? Well, I think the reality is, in our heyday, when Kodak was the only occupant of Eastman Business Park, it made sense for us under George Eastman's vertical integration model to really own and operate each and every one of the component businesses in there, which included the utilities. The time has come where Kodak no longer has the requisite technology in order to really be able to run an efficient utilities business going forward. And we know we have to convert that from coal to some other type of fuel source. Very, very likely it's going to be natural gas. This company has that technology in their hand. They put in a lot of gas turbine generators. They know how to convert a coal plant to natural gas. Natural gas is a much cleaner fuel. And of course, with fracking, whether or not New York gets on board or not, I'll let this team debate that. But natural gas prices are incredibly low. They used to be over $10 to $12, and now they're around $3. So we will be converting our power plant to natural gas. But it's not just an electricity plant. By the way, the power plant at Eastman Business Park could power, cool, and heat 100,000 homes. Give you a rough idea on the size of that. 100,000 homes. We also produce steam, we also produce chilled water, we produce nitrogen, compressed air, we have industrial wastewater treatment. We have one of the largest permits in the Northeast, or in the Great Lakes regions, for withdrawal from the Great Lakes, very valuable, 50 million gallons per day. And in our heyday, we were withdrawing about 47, 48 million gallons. And now we're down to about 11 million gallons. We got lots of capacity. So if companies have a high water usage, and some will come up and say, we really like you to know that we have incredible water usage. Well, what do you have? About 1 million gallons a day. Can you handle it? We can handle it. So, the facility and the utilities infrastructure is really world class. So here are some of the companies that are on site. And what I'm proud of is the diversity of companies that we have on site here. I gotta stay in the camera here. I'm not used to standing in one spot, Mike. We decided about 5 years ago that we were going to sell off some of our properties, and when we did that in the very southwestern corner, we had companies like Rochester Foods, which is one of the largest private label maker pasta sauces and salsa. They also have a spirits business. They do things like Captain Morgan's flavored rum. So you ought to go get a tour. Forget about the pasta sauces. It's a bad day. Just go right to the spirit side. We have companies like Aquest, which bought our 2 million square foot warehouse, that they've developed that into their own mini industrial park. And then we have 3 Fortune 500 companies. We have DuPont, which just bought the Danisco facility and is part of their food enzyme facility in the very southwest corner. We have ITT Excelis, which just announced that they're expanding in Eastman Business Park and bringing 50 new jobs to the region. And then we have Ortho Clinical Diagnostics, which is part of Johnson & Johnson. Pretty big user. And as Brian mentioned earlier, there's 7,000 people at the park. 3,000 of those are Kodak employees. 4,000 are now attending. Lori?
So, just for clarification, those buildings actually were sold off, or are they still owned by Kodak?
They're not owned. Of the 16 million square feet, 6 million is now owned by other companies, 10 million is owned by Kodak. But they are part of the 1,250 acre campus.
Okay.
And the significance is that 1,250 acre is, if you will, our invisible fence line for your selling utilities.
As
So
I
even
said,
though,
shared resources.
even though they own their own business, they own their own facility and the land, they still get their utilities from us.
Okay.
Now, they have the right to switch to RG&E, but the only thing, what's the only thing RG&E can protect it or provide them?
Yes.
Get gas and electric, right? So they can't get steam, they can't get water from them, they can't get water from Monroe County, they can't get compressed air and nitrogen, they certainly can't get the industrial wastewater treatment that we provide. So when you look at the suite of utilities we provide, it's much less costly for them to be there. Because I will tell you, if our prices got out of line, they would go right to RG&E. They certainly can't get the industrial wastewater treatment that we provide. So when you look at the suite of utilities we provide, it's much less costly for them to be there. Because I will tell you, if our prices got out of line, they would go right to RG&E. So some of these companies now are focused in the area of clean tech. When we looked at how we were going to repurpose the park, we had to choose what areas that made the most sense. And the areas we ultimately focused on are these three. Energy storage devices, okay, that's one. Functional films, that's two. And biomaterials, advanced manufacturing, that's three. You say, what the heck does that have to do, Mike, with photographic manufacturing? What does it have to do with photographic manufacturing? Actually, it has a lot to do with it, because if you look at the vertical integration that was built, if you look at energy storage, okay, why are they attracted there? No, by the way, New York BEST, New York Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium is based in New York, funded by NYSERDA, to the tune of about $25 million over 5 years, is building their $20 million commercialization center at Eastman Business Park. It's a facility called Building 308, right on the corner of, well, halfway down between Bridge and Bridgeway on Mountain Boulevard. For those of you who worked at Kodak, it's the old DPI facility that's being repurposed for clean tech. Okay. So in the energy storage space, they need access to battery membranes, fuel cell membranes, thin film coatings. Guess what? That's right there. They need access to companies that can do hazardous materials handling and chemical development. We have our own specialty chemicals, we have our own analytical labs, we can help produce those. We can actually have a company come in, bring their technology, we can produce the chemicals, we can produce the nanoparticles and metals for them through our milling operation, and then we can deposit that on film. So we can help them make the next generation of batteries. And then once they make those batteries, and I'm not talking about the ones in your computer, I'm talking about ones that could be 1 megawatt, 5 megawatt in size, we can then connect them to our electric grid, which operates at 13,800 volts. So this isn't what you plug into the wall. This is cables the size of these columns. And do all the testing live on our grid with our utility.